What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you with our bonus clip of the week. Not sure I'll be doing this every week in the off season, but the goal is to, whenever I can, if there's something I want to react to post it as just a bonus clip, very ultra mini episode, in addition to the 3 full-length episodes that we give you per week at the moment. And I'm going to tell you why you're going to subscribe, not just because we put out a bunch of content, but it's Saturday night. Instead of being out gallivanting with the youths, I'm here recording this content for you because I know that you need to hear about Lauri Markkanen. I thought Zach Lowe and Tim MacMahon of ESPN had a very interesting discussion on the Lowe post this past week. So it's on the video. We'll throw it up on YouTube, but also if you're hearing it on audio, I think it'll translate well. We're just going to react to it. So that's why you're going to subscribe, like, comment on YouTube, help the Yago love us back, and get on Spotify, Apple, the whole nine, subscribe. Tell people about us if you've done that already. Shout us out on Twitter, and also support the show by purchasing our merch. I'm in a sicko mode. Crew neck, we've established, is what they're called when they do not have a hood, but they are still a sweatshirt. I'm also wearing a proud Sickos hat, but you can't see the logo because it's on backwards. But go support the show, purchase our merch. I'll figure it out, but don't click the YouTube shop is inflating the prices for some reason. If you click the link in our YouTube and podcast description, you'll get the actual prices. I don't know why YouTube inflated it, like, I don't know, $5 to $10 an item, but let's get off and running and talk about Lauri Markkanen, the Utah Jazz, the future, the whole nine. Okay, here we go. This entire clip of theirs is like 9 minutes long. I don't know if I'll watch the whole thing. We want to get the gist of it, and I don't want to keep you here for an absolute hour, although maybe I will. We never know what happens around these parts. So let's get to some Zach Lowe and Tim MacMahon talk.
What do we think is actually going to happen here? And
so I'm just going to stop it right there, as I always do at the beginning. Zach Lowe and Tim MacMahon, I think I call a friend of the podcast Tim MacMahon because he either follows HardwoodKnocks or me. I can't remember. I should look at that. Don't know why he would have followed either, but that's really cool. If there were 2 people that I could get like a drink with in the industry as insiders, they would be, or a bunch of people, they would certainly be on the list. And in a way, they kind of remind me of me and Grant, although Zach Lowe is way smarter than I am. He brings that frenetic, over exuberant, did I just pop Molly and decide to record a podcast and talk about the NBA energy? Like, he's always just so into it, and he can talk a mile a minute just like I do. And then Tim MacMahon is, we all know that Grant has the same level of inside information, of course, but laid back, very funny, can say some clever lines at points, but is someone that I think you listen to, and it's just a nice balance to that frenetic energy. And so this is basically me reacting to Grant and myself, and Grant's on vacation. So that's pretty apropos right now, as I miss him so much that I need that dynamic, but that's just a nice little comp. But I would say these are 2 guys I enjoy listening to. And I know a lot of people don't like listening to national voices. These are 2 of the ones that I admire their insight. I admire the inside information they get, but they also just seem like people I'd want to go out and have them. I don't drink, so go out and pop an edible with or have a meal with. So just in case you needed to hear that, Utah Jazz fans and or / general basketball fans.
when?
Yeah. So my best educated guess is that Lauri Markkanen will not be traded this summer, that he will sign the extension after August 6th.
We have talked about this exact scenario on the pod. I think Grant might have even predicted it when we were doing our one big question for each team. And so for anyone who doesn't know already, Lauri Markkanen can be renegotiated and extended. And the way it would essentially work, the numbers could be different, but the Jazz have the cap space to give him his max salary for next season. And that would cost about $24 million of their cap space. His max salary is a little over 42. He's already making a little over 18, so about $24 million bucks. They then have the option of extending him off that number. So he could get the boat of, I believe it's 4 years and $207.8 million, whatever the number is. It's over $200 million. So you would then lock him down. You would still have him for next season, plus 4 additional seasons. And that is the max. He could then end up guaranteeing himself like 5 years total. And let's say like 48 million. And if you include the initial 18 he's making, it's like an additional $230 million over that 5-year span. So that is an option he could explore. We talked about him not agreeing to hit the renegotiate and extend button on August 6th, because that's the day he's eligible. And the last day that he can sign it and also be traded in season at the deadline, that one day. And I understand it from his perspective. Tim MacMahon gets into it a little bit here though. So let's let him talk about it before I go into any more detail.
He is not going to sign an extension on August 6th and live with being in constant trade rumors up until February 6th. He is not going to put himself in a position where he's going to have to deal with that. As a married father with a young family that is happy in Utah, like Lauri's made it clear, he likes being in Utah. He wants to be part of the future there. The Jazz front office, and
that is what we had talked about, not the, being married and having kids and not wanting to uproot yourself, but the whole issue of not wanting to relocate midseason. If you have the leverage to dictate when you sign the extension, and you could sign it the day after and ensure that I'm just going to be here all year, we could figure this thing out next summer or later down the road. And it also, of course, matters if he really likes living in Utah and likes being a focal point of their offense. This could be on some level, maybe it is posturing, and not in the sense that he doesn't want to play for the Jazz or the organization or be in the city, but maybe he doesn't want to be part of a longer term gradual rebuild. And if he's thinking, oh, they'll either accelerate their timeline, or he's just posturing to, hey, I want to get this massive raise immediately rather than wait until next summer.
Obviously you always take things with a grain of salt, but the Jazz front office, Will Hardy, they've made it clear they love having Lauri Markkanen. Like, kind of the messaging you hear out of Utah is, hey, Lauri Markkanen's not on the trade block. Like, we'll take calls, we'll listen.
I do think that's an important element of all this, where I probably would, if I had to guess, think that Tim MacMahon is overstating the degree to which Lauri Markkanen is not available. But this isn't like the Jazz calling around the league, hawking Lauri Markkanen and getting ready to take what would be the best offer. It wasn't like that with the Nets and Mikal Bridges. It was, they probably lined up that trade with Houston, and then they would have called around and seen what they could have gotten from Mikal Bridges, but there was probably a bunch of standing offers, top shelf offers. And so while we've only seen kind of the Warriors and the Spurs mentioned most publicly when it comes to marketing, there are other offers that I'm sure are on the table, and Utah can circle back to them, or teams will circle back to them, or maybe they call them to see if they'll up their offer. But I don't view this right now as the Jazz trying to auction Lauri Markkanen off, where they view it as, hey, we have to move him. Because if we felt that way, they just never would renegotiate and extend him so that they could keep the flexibility of moving him.
Got to do your due diligence, but he's not, quote unquote, being shopped. He's not going to, it's not like, hey, whoever makes the best bid for Lauri Markkanen gets him.
There you go.
You mentioned like the Warriors. Lauri Markkanen at the right price for the Warriors would be unbelievable. The right price for the Warriors ain't getting Lauri Markkanen.
And that, from what we've seen reported and just what we all know, kind of seems in line, where it's the Jazz want, it seems, pods and all the available picks, probably plus Moody, whatever salary. I don't know if they're hot for Kuminga or they're insisting he be included on that, but it seems like if the Warriors were going to get Lauri Markkanen, it'd have to be pods, Moody, and all the picks at the bare minimum. And while I think that's a fair line for them to just draw based on Markkanen's immediate value, and the Warriors maybe desperation, even though Draymond Green says he put the kibosh on any deal. I don't know if he's trying to gain the Warriors leverage or if he's just trying to make it seem like he's in the young guys' corner in case this doesn't go down. Maybe it's a little bit of both. But if you're the Warriors, yes, you want to maximize Steph's present, Draymond's present, but are they good enough to be the two best players on a title team? Or is Steph good enough to be the best player on a title team when his second best player is Draymond Green or Lauri Markkanen? That's in question. And then to give up all that stuff to where you're basically punting on the future, let's say, except for Jonathan Kuminga, you understand both sides of why there might be a stalemate.
It's like, you like your house, right, Zach?
It's all right. Owning a home. What they don't tell you about owning a home in the movies, I guess they do in movies like The Money Pit, is just like,
it is a money pit.
Something is always going wrong. And
a fucking men, as someone who is a homeowner, and it's just always something. In the dead of July, our central air went out. And so we're going to have to replace that. That's nice little, who doesn't just want to drop 14 grand in the bucket? And I know central air is a luxury. I want to make that clear. I know I'm still super lucky, but it's always something with a house. That's not really related to Lauri Markkanen, although he probably has whatever he's rented or purchased in Utah. He's probably dealing with some stuff.
And you might be shocked to know, Tim MacMahon, our listeners are surely going to be shocked to know, I can't fix anything. I have no handyman skills.
On that.
Same thing. I don't, I used to like to blame growing up in a house without a father to teach me this stuff. And my mother was not super handy, but at this point, it's just, I could have learned. There are people that tried to teach me. The stuff that the tool that's called a Sawzall when I was younger and took down a half pipe for my then girlfriend's father, now my father-in-law, and it was her brother's. I almost chopped my neck off basically with that thing. And it was, you work so much, and then you don't have time to learn, but I am completely inept. I need assistance basically when changing a light bulb is like the extent of my independence when it comes to being handy. Luckily, my wife is super handy and will build all the furniture and stuff. This has nothing to do with Lauri Markkanen, but I enjoyed this little aside from Zach and Tim.
Of any kind.
But your house isn't on the market.
No.
If somebody knocks on your door and makes you a ridiculous deal for a whole lot more than you bought the house for, would you potentially sell it?
Sure.
Okay.
Then I just got to buy another one or move somewhere.
This is actually about Lauri Markkanen. Don't worry, everybody. That's a really good analogy, and it probably stands. I mean, look at what Utah did with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. It feels like they kind of followed the same approach, and Rudy Gobert specifically, where it was Minnesota bowls them over with an offer, and that's why they end up moving him, and that's the impetus for them tearing it down, and then it reset the market for Donovan Mitchell, made it easier to move him, or at least command this king's ransom for him. And I'm sure it was the same with Mikal Bridges. I don't know how married the Nets were to let's pair him with another star, but if you knew that Knicks offer was on the table, and then it's okay, that makes the idea of tearing it down more palatable if we can get back some of our own picks, which then you eventually negotiate with Houston to do. And it feels like that situation all over again with Utah. Again, maybe Danny Ainge saw what Mikal Bridges got. He was in on Mikal Bridges. Maybe he inflated the asking price for the Knicks and then was going to use that as the baseline for Lauri Markkanen, who has no years left on his deal, makes it a little tougher. But that seems like this is the Jazz being opportunistic. But there is a more wholesale question that we will get to in more detail in a second is, do the Jazz actually need to trade Lauri given the direction that they're headed?
Or reorient my life, which is a huge giant pain in the ass.
My point is Lauri Markkanen's not on the market. That doesn't mean that he won't get moved, but there's not been anything in all the conversations the Jazz have had, and obviously, the Warriors have been out there. A lot of reporting on that. The Spurs are preliminary talks. The Kings.
I would just like to say, and I would still kind of like Lauri and the Kings, but I don't know what that does defensively to you. And please, Kings fans, don't get in my mentions talking about DeMar DeRozan's defensive rating in Chicago last year. That is not a team stat. He got to play a bunch with Alex Caruso, Ayo Dosunmu, Patrick Williams. I think DeMar DeRozan's an upgrade from Harrison Barnes, but the amount of Kings fans that thought Grant and I were saying the world was over and their defense was going to suck because of the departure of Harrison Barnes, we're concerned about the defense. We also called in that same discussion Keegan Murray, one of the most underrated defenders in the NBA, and we acknowledged Keon Ellis's value, and we've acknowledged De'Aaron Fox's improvement on that side of the floor. But regardless, I think San Antonio is actually by far my favorite fit for Lauri Markkanen. Him with CP3 and Wemby and Devin Vassell is just a fucking cheat code. And look, the Spurs, they got picks, and they got some nice distant picks or semi-distant picks. They got the Hawks in 25 and 27, plus that swap in 26. And they also have Minnesota's 2031 first round pick. And they also have that Kings 2030 swap floating around in there. They also have another, don't they have like a dual, or is it Minnesota's 2030 first round pick? I can't remember on that one, but they have these like assets for days. So yeah, they have Minnesota's 2031 first, and then they get to swap with Sacramento in 2031. They have swap rights with Dallas or Minnesota in 2030. Plus, let's not forget, they have swap rights on Boston's 2028 first rounder. The Spurs have the juice to get it done, and I would love to see them get it done. Not going to lie.
Before they went the DeRozan direction, a lot of teams have called and checked in. There has been nothing even remotely tempting from the Jazz's perspective to this point. Negotiation and extension, getting the massive raise to where it'd be 40+ mil this year into an extension moving forward, and it'll be signed after August 7th, basically giving him a 1-year no trade clause.
Now, for people might be wondering why the Jazz just wouldn't say, well, we're not going to renegotiate and extend you if you go that route. It would be because they nuke his trade value effectively, because they keep him on that expiring contract, and they're in a situation where teams either say, well, now you need to move him because it clearly isn't, an amicable decision. And so he's going to get to unrestricted free agency. And yeah, you have the carrot of the 5th year, can offer him bigger raises, but he'll just leave and there will be a team that'll offer him a ton of money. And so that cost the Jazz a ton of leverage. It'd be different if he was going into restricted free agency or something, and they would have the easy matching rights. absolute control over him. But if you're going to say, no, we kept this cap space, we're not going to renegotiate and extend you out of spite because you wouldn't sign it on the one day that would leave you trade eligible in the season, that ends poorly. And so Lauri Markkanen does have the leverage. I want to make that clear. I don't know if it ends up being the full boat where we're looking at, gets the max salary next year plus a max, 4 years out on that. But he does have the leverage to go this route. And honestly, if he likes it in Utah or just doesn't want to be, it'd be different if they could tell him, well, you're going to go here in February. Like, we know we're going to trade you to the Warriors, but you can't. That's not a thing. That's not something that works. And so if I were him, I would approach it the same way. My best intel, talking to people, and you just never know, right? But like, all you can do is hear everything and do your best, is that there will not be a trade this season, that he'll be on the Jazz this season. I don't know if that's true. I like it when HardwoodKnocks is in lockstep with two smart people who also have a bunch of inside information. I don't know what percentage-wise that is, but if you ask me what I think is going to happen with Lauri Markkanen, whether he signs at the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, the 15th, I think the most likely scenario is he's on the Jazz. And yet I keep coming back to why does that nag at me as not a standalone thing that on its own makes a ton of sense? Because it doesn't make a ton of sense from the perspective of the Jazz, to me, are clearly going through some level of, if not an existential crisis, an existential enlightenment of just realizing, okay, we're probably not going to accelerate the rebuild enough to get to a point where it makes sense to keep Lauri long-term. You're capped on what you could do with him as the best player on your team. And we don't believe Walker Kessler is already being shopped. And we have Keontae George, we have Taylor Hendricks, we have Cody Williams, we have some other young guys. We've got Jordan Clarkson, we've got Colin Sexton, we've got John Collins. You've kind of just trapped between a bunch of different timelines and are destined, with Lauri Markkanen playing a bunch of minutes, to maybe be better than expected, hover at or near 500, and then kind of have to pull back in the middle of the season when you've already lost valuable tanking or rebuilding time. And so it's that weird, just gray. It's not even a gray area. It's just this ambiguous area that they've now been floating in. I don't want to say aimlessly, because they do have a lot of assets. When you look at picks, I like some of their young players. But it is a weird spot that they have. I don't know that they put themselves in it, but it's certainly something that they need to consider moving forward. And like, I don't think that having Lauri Markkanen on this team is going to allow you to rebuild to the fullest extent, just because he will invariably add wins to your ledger. Even if you I guess you could strip it down to the studs around him, but do you just have takers for Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson? And that's the awkward spot that they're in. And the reason is
Jazz need to tank.
Well, there's two reasons. Number one, they need to do something, and they can't do the same thing that they've been doing the last 2 years, where they're 500 and scrappy and feisty, and Will Hardy's coaching his ass off, and oh my God, blah, blah, blah. And then the front office pulls the rug. I forgot Zach Lowe said all this, so I apologize for stepping on the toes of everything he said. Sentiments we've conveyed somewhat on this podcast already, though, so whatever. Out from under it halfway through, and you end up picking 9th, 10th, 11th, whatever they've ended up picking. That's what's going to happen if they just bring back Lauri Markkanen and do nothing else. Right. And the problem there is, even if you say that you're going to shut him down or just use him like in a moderate capacity, if you've already paid him, I guess that might fly with him, but this is still going to be a star with an ego and that wants to play. And if you are planning on trading him, you're doing nothing for his trade value, though, whether you've paid him or not. And by playing him less or shutting him down at the end of the season, maybe potentially deflating his numbers, or teams might game it as, oh, Lauri Markkanen was on this team, had another really good, efficient scoring season, and the Jazz won 21 games or something by design. But what does that say about his impact on winning? That wouldn't be a fair stance, but you do risk compromising Lauri Markkanen's trade value if you keep him and lean fully into the rebuild. I just don't think that they want to do that. I don't care what the posturing is publicly. Yeah. I don't care what you're saying. I think it's true of, like, you've got to blow us away with this Mikal Bridges level offer to get Lauri Markkanen. I know Danny Ainge. I know how he operates. I think he wants to be in this draft and or the next draft at a high level. And I just don't think they can do that with just Lauri Markkanen. And I also don't think they can compete realistically for anything better than like maybe a low end playoff spot if they just bring back Lauri Markkanen. Yeah. And that's like, even that's ambitious, because if you look at the landscape of the Western Conference right now, it's
I mean, what is the team that's not planning on making some type of a push for a play-in spot? It is, as of right now, it's Portland, and I guess you might throw Utah in that, and there might be a level of, oh, Houston's not too committed to doing it, because they have a bunch of youngsters they're still evaluating, and they're trying to figure that out. But when you look at the West, the only team that is already taking itself out of the play-in discussion is Portland and perhaps Utah. And so you have to sit there as the Jazz and ask yourself, well, how many teams with Lauri Markkanen are we guaranteed to be better than? The answer is one. And I think they actually go on to answer that later in this clip. We'll skip over that part. But like, it's one. And if you really wanted to like push it, you could just say maybe two and bet on, okay, the uncertainty with the Clippers, the uncertainty with New Orleans' center rotation. Again, I'm reaching here in a bunch of spots. And like, maybe we'll be better than San Antonio, who might not be super interested in winning either. So like, you could certainly consider that, but at maximum, I would say to guarantee, you could say, yeah, they'll finish 13th in the West at I would say, I don't want to say that's their ceiling, but that's the only thing that you could be prepared to guarantee. And look, you go by last year, if you have the third worst record in the Western Conference, that amounts to the seventh best lottery odds if it follows that type of pattern. But you're adding weird things into the fold, because look at what the worst teams in the East were. Look at who the worst teams in the East were: Detroit, Washington, Charlotte, and Toronto. Before you get to Memphis, was the third worst team in the West because of injuries last year. You have to add Chicago and Brooklyn to that mix, and the only team I might take out that could be interested in winning, I think it would be Toronto. Charlotte, I really do think could be better than expected if they're healthy, but I do think they'll trade or shut down players to get their way out of that. And so if you're the Jazz, it's important to be organically bad as possible right out of the gate, because if you want to be in the running if you want to be in the pooper for Cooper, it's not going to be something that you can just do playing your veterans for half the year and then pulling back. Yeah, you could get lucky in the lottery, but if you're trying to maximize your odds, that's not going to be the way to do it. Not even close.
Which is why I think it's interesting that they were reportedly in on Mikal Bridges before Mikal Bridges got traded to the Knicks. And I've been told in the last couple of days that like they were even more aggressively in for Mikal Bridges. And this is just according to a couple sources, who knows. But that was maybe reported, which makes me wonder just kind of what's going on here, because
and that's interesting, because there was the initial reporting, and this is like Lowe is one of the first people I've heard say, I think the first person I've heard say this. A lot of people thought it was just performative, their interest in Mikal Bridges. It was, if the Nets are going to move him and we could give up a few picks for it. Or a lot of people thought they're driving up the price of Mikal Bridges so that then that resets the market for Lauri Markkanen, even though if you're trading him as an expiring contract, he's just not going to have as much value as Mikal Bridges. Here's the thing. You can make the case that Lauri Markkanen is more valuable in a vacuum than Mikal Bridges. On offense, I think that's certainly the case right now. But when you look at not only him needing a new deal, but the fact that he is not going to take a discount in said deal with Bridges, part of the stuff that was caked in for the Knicks is Jalen Brunson might just sign this extension to play with his friends, which he did. And maybe Mikal Bridges, he can sign a 105% extension, or we could extend him for 140% off next year's number once the season is over. Those are both numbers on top of the Jalen Brunson number that would be considered below what he would get on the open market. You're not going to get that by all appearances with Lauri. Nor, I want to make it clear, nor should you if you're marketing. Get your money. Like, this is your chance to cash in on. You've been on this below market deal now. You graduated into borderline all-stardom. And that's part of the calculus here, which is why you still should get a boatload for Markkanen. But if you are holding out hope for the Mikal Bridges level offer, you're more likely to get it if you renegotiate and extend him, and then you're reevaluating next summer. But that only, again, it complicates your position in the Western Conference relative to, well, we want to rebuild and we want to have super high lottery odds.
Just bringing back Lauri Markkanen and not doing anything else, it doesn't pass the smell test to me. And I don't know what the other alternative is, though.
And I think that's kind of like where we can leave the clip, even, because this is the question. This is just the whole point of this exercise. Do the Jazz need to trade Lauri Markkanen. And if you're going to maximize your lottery odds, the answer is yes. And that's a compliment to Lauri Markkanen. It's a compliment to Will Hardy. It's a compliment to a lot of the supporting cast members on Utah. You could strip it down elsewhere, but what's the market for Sexton and Clarkson and Collins? I would argue there's probably not a super robust market for Collins, if at all. Like, you're not going to get, I would think, any positive value. You'll probably get a little something for Jordan Clarkson. His deal is relatively reasonable, and teams can count on him as some secondary facilitator and someone who's comfortable generating his own shot. And Sexton, I think you'd probably get the equivalent of 2 first-round picks for. That would be my guess, but the market's now kind of dried up. That's also a weird situation that you're in, is you're looking at teams that are mostly set. There might still be teams that are willing to trade for these guys, don't get me wrong, but there's probably a lot of teams. Let's use the Magic as an example, who could be a team for Jordan Clarkson or Sexton, more likely Sexton. They're probably like, well, we've gone about our business. We got KCP. Let's see if we can level up on offense, internally before we go down that path. And that's, so by waiting this long, you've damaged the trade options for other players on your roster. And so here's where I'm at. Do you need to trade Lauri Markkanen right now? I almost feel like the answer is yes, if you want to maximize your rebuild. And if you're not going to trade him, I do wonder, do you seriously look at, I don't know who else is available, but making kind of a small consolidation trade or a medium size to say, hey, well, then we're just going to double down around Lauri Markkanen? That's a less palatable path to me. If I had, like, the outcomes here would be, okay, well, then let's strip down everything else. And that's what we're going to do. Or Lauri Markkanen's going to play 25 minutes a game or just 30 minutes a game. We're cutting him off after that. And the game will be lost in other minutes because we'll keep Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson more easily in check. And we're going to give a ton of minutes to all the youngsters. You're going to see a lot of Taylor Hendricks. You're going to see a lot of Cody Williams, Bryce Sensabaugh. You're going to see a lot of Keontae George just running the point here. Again, the Jazz with Lauri could still be pretty bad relative to the rest of the West, but you're in a position where you need to out-tank a lot of the other teams in the East, and you're not going to do that by holding on to him mid-season. And if I'm the Jazz, I'm not trading him for the sake of trading him. That's what makes this situation so tough. It's almost like they should have moved him last summer. Would have been the optimal time when he had the multiple years left on his deal. They probably could have commanded close to a Mikal Bridges type haul, if not the, ditto, like that exact type haul. And maybe they still get it. I mean, if you're going to get I don't want to call it settling, but if the Warriors are going to give you 2 or 3 firsts and then Pods and Moody, or if it's 2 firsts, Pods and Moody and swaps, that's something I'm considering. Sub out Kuminga for Pods if you really like Kuminga better, and you could look at it that way. But like, I don't know that you're going to get, let's say the Warriors can give up the 3 first-round picks, and the way they get to 3 is they trade the unprotected part of that pick that's going to Washington. 3 firsts, 2 swaps, whatever swaps they have, plus Moody, plus I'm not doing that if I'm Golden State, especially if it's Pods and Kuminga, but I'm not close enough to title contention to do Pods, Moody, 3 firsts, and multiple swaps. It's just, Lauri Markkanen is not putting me over the top. That's not an insult to Lauri Markkanen. It's not even an insult to, it's just the reality of the Warrior situation. Now, if you're getting Pods, 2 firsts and swaps and Moody, or Pods, a first, multiple swaps and Moody, like that's probably the bare minimum for me as Danny Ainge. Maybe I'm too high on Pods. If the Spurs are putting, I know there's reports that the Jazz don't want Keldon Johnson. If you want to, do matching salary, there's Keldon Johnson's on a pretty good deal and fills a position of need at the 3, especially with Lauri Markkanen outgoing. It's sort of that combo forward. So no, he's not even close to the same type of player as Lauri Markkanen. I want to make that absolutely positively clear, but I found that weird. It's, you take Keldon Johnson. If the Spurs are saying, well, we'll give you Keldon Johnson instead of 2 other firsts, it's a different discussion. But between Keldon Johnson, and if they're going to give you I don't know, let's say 3, if you can get, I'll frame it this way. If you can get the equivalent of 3 firsts and then either multiple swaps or Jeremy Sohan, that feels like a fair price for Lauri Markkanen. And you could sit here and say, well, no, then we don't want to trade him. That's fine. But if you're Utah, what are you doing? Why are you not more aggressive in making upgrades to be immediately good? And if the plan is to still be bad with Lauri Markkanen, I think here's what you're going to do. You're inevitably going to half-ass it and not be bad enough, or you're bad enough and Lauri Markkanen's trade value after paying him is tanked in the process. And so that's the predicament the Jazz are in. And I want to make it clear, I'm not advocating for them to trade Lauri Markkanen just for the sake of trading them. If the baseline minimums of, let's say, 3 firsts and Jeremy Sohan or multiple swaps isn't out there, I get it. I would probably even trade him for less than that, but I'm trying to be sympathetic to what, the way that the Jazz are looking at this. If you're even close to meeting multiple good first round picks, some swaps and multiple, like if you're checking, like if we're talking 2 prospects, 3 first-round picks, and 2 swaps. So you're looking at a total of 7 things that you're prioritizing, and maybe even up it to 8. If you're checking like 4, 5, 6 of those boxes, it's worth considering. It depends on the prospect. It depends on the picks, the protections, how far they go out, who they're coming from. But like that's when you really need to start thinking. And if you're not going to do it, and he's not, like the ideal outcome for them, I would argue, is he signs it on August 6th. It doesn't seem like he's going to do that. So maybe that's what the Jazz are kind of holding out hope for, is that he will go that route. And then if he doesn't, well, then they're just not going to renegotiate and extend him, and they'll move him anyway because these other offers will still be there. That is almost like is that the smartest or wisest outcome here? Would be, okay, we're going to see if we can call his bluff and he'll sign it on August 6th. Or maybe, for all we know, he's already agreed to sign it August 6th, and they're going to say, okay, we'll know what the offers are at the trade deadline. Or if he doesn't sign it, all right, we waited, we tried, and we're going to trade him now. And anyway, like that, the best offers from Golden State or San Antonio, we're going to take that. And that's what's going to happen. I guess the other way to look at it, though, is even if he's eligible to be traded this season after renegotiating and extending, those moves, like are the Spurs going to be as hot for Lauri Markkanen in February as they are in August? And ditto for the Warriors, because those are 2 teams that could be worse than expected. We're all high on the Spurs. We all know what Steph can still do, but like those are 2 teams that aren't guaranteed spots in the play-in race right now. And so if you're the Warriors, why are you mortgaging more of your future just to not? And it's even harder for them to do it than the Spurs, because the Spurs can look at it as a future investment next to Wemby and Devin Vassell. The Warriors can't do that because any Markkanen trade is going to cost them at least 2 of Pods, Moody, and Kuminga. I would say it costs at least Pods and Moody, and then picks and stuff. So that's like one of Pods and Kuminga or Moody, I was saying. And by all reporting, it seems like it's Pods, which makes sense for the Jazz. Even though they might be a little guard heavy right now, I think Pods is more likely to pan out, like his medium outcome, whereas Kuminga seems not boom or bust, but incredibly good, might hit like on a star end outcome, but you're about to pay him. So that gets a little wonky. And again, how does he fit next to, do you like Taylor Hendricks? Do you like Cody Williams? Do you still like Walker Kessler? What is the dynamic there? I would just, if I'm Utah, I'm prioritizing Pods because of the cost control. And I think he's going to be more offensively versatile to where it's all right. Maybe this is someone who, look, he shot like 43% on step back threes. So maybe he can generate his own looks, but if not, he'll be good connective tissue, some secondary playmaking. That's why I prioritize him. This is way off track there though, but that's what I'm doing. If I'm Utah's, is kind of, or how I'm looking at it is, are these teams going to be as hot for him in February? Now, I guess what you could say is, well, other teams, there'll be teams that are better than expected that will be hot for him. And I can't even name one, but like, let's just like, what if the Grizzlies are just gangbusters? We all know that they can potentially be gangbusters, and they're willing to put a crap ton of future first round picks on the table. Okay. Yeah, maybe. But there are so few of those teams to where it's, would Houston be in on Lauri Markkanen? Doesn't make a ton of sense for them if they're better than expected. Maybe Toronto, but you're not looking at any blue chip prospects here because they're not giving up Scotty Barnes, probably not giving up Emmanuel Quickly. Would Utah even want him on his new deal? But like Jacoby Walter, Grady Dick, future first, like that's not really a ton. And so, yeah, there might be other teams that sneak in there with assets that are willing to give up a bunch. Is it Indiana with Jarris Walker and Benedict Mathurin and future first round picks and maybe Ben Shepherd, some combination of those? And it's all right, defense be damned, I guess. I mean, Hallie, Siakam, and Markkanen would be a heck of an offense if Andrew Nembhard is with Andrew Nembhard still there. Like, yeah, you could get to a point where there might just be surprise suitors who are willing to give up a bunch, but more likely, I mean, when you're looking at the landscape, a lot of the teams that are already going to be good strapped on assets. And so, yeah, okay, maybe Miami is willing to get in the fold, but unless you just view Jaime Jaquez as worth a lot more than what Golden State is offering right now, because Miami is going to give you even fewer first round picks at their max. Again, maybe Golden State's only offering 1 first round pick or something, who knows? So that you're going to be strapped to get future assets out of them a little bit more. OKC is, of course, floating around, not the team we mentioned. They don't seem like a squad, like just historically, that they're going to mega shake up middle of the season. And they just got Isaiah Hartenstein to add to their front court with Chet. Markkanen's a better fit. You can also play him at the 3. He's an easier fit, but like Hartenstein's an easy fit too. You can play him at the 3. That seems like a classic. Well, we want more information of what this looks like in the playoffs before we go after Lowry. Maybe not. Maybe there's a level of urgency there just because they were the number 1 seed in the West and they're favored to come out of the West right now. So, and unless you're like high on, okay, maybe we'll get more of the Lakers picks, 29, 31, swaps, Dalton Connect. And do we like Rui Hachimura? Do we like Austin Reeves? Sure. There might be alternatives, teams that would be willing to give you, are you kind of looking at this from the Philly perspective of, they'll step ladder their way to Lauri Markkanen's 18 million. And like you would no, because with Philly, even they have up to 5 first-round picks they could give you, and there's going to be no prospects in there. I should say no super high-end prospects. They could give you if you want. In addition to the first-round picks, they can give you Jared McCain. Sure, they can go that route, but here's what gets interesting: Philly's taken out of the equation if you renegotiate and extend him, because they're not going to have the salary matching to get to a $40+ million number. They can get to the 18. They can step ladder their way there for sure. So if that's what they're gaming it, I think the big clue would be if he doesn't sign or renegotiate and extend and they keep him into next season, it's, they got something lined up when the trade restrictions lift. I'd view that as the least likely scenario. It feels like I agree with Tim McMahon and Zach Lowe that he will end up signing the renegotiation and extend after August 6th. If he signs it on that, it still gets super interesting, but I still think you're leaving a lot to chance. If you're going to move Lauri Markkanen, it either, to me, I'll frame it this way, it needs to be now or it needs to be next summer. Like that would be when you're going to maximize your value. What do you think? Where do you think Lauri Markkanen starts next season? Where do you think he finishes next season? Do you think he'll sign the renegotiation and extend? I want to see Jazz fans, all NBA fans of trades in the comments. So much for just a mini clip. This thing ends up being over 30 minutes. Please remember to subscribe if you have not already. Tell your friends, enemies, acquaintances, random people on the street about us. We appreciate shout outs. Until next time. And as always, I leave with the shout out to the one, the only, the indelible hero for Team France, Frank Ntilikina.